We are going to begin. We're discussing strategic planning and board development. I am the moderator. My name is Michael Fleischer. I'm from SterlingRisk. I am one of the members of the organization, and I am pleased to have a great group of individuals. We have Christine Deska, who is the co-founder and president of Nonprofit Sector Strategies. We have Karikari-Yawson, who is a diversity speaker, trainer, and consultant with Milestales. And we have Ellie Reiter, the director of governance and leadership with Youth Inc. Rather than me bore you with discussing their attributes and how wonderful they are, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to give us a brief introduction, and then we'll get to the questions that we've got that will hopefully give you an overview of how we think that we can assist you with strategic planning and board development. So Christine, if you would take it away, that'd be great.
Sure. Thanks so much, Michael. And thanks everyone for making time for another Zoom. I'm glad that we're able to do this virtually so more folks from different areas can participate and have these recordings. So I'm Christine Deska. I'm the co-founder and president of Nonprofit Sector Strategies. Our business is in its sixth year now. And so we work a lot around strategic planning. This is probably one of my favorite topics. So to marry it with board development is really something that I'm really passionate about. I'm a board member as well. I serve on the board. Obviously here I'm the president of the Nonprofit Resource Hub. I'm tremendously honored to be part of this group. And have fantastic associate members like Michael to work with. But I'm also a board member at Hunger Solutions New York. So kind of day in and day out, living and breathing kind of how should board development really be integrated with strategic planning is something that I love, just seeing how different organizations approach it. And to be alongside Ellie and Amma today is just such an honor as well. So that's kind of my brief intro. I'll also say that we focus a lot on specifically board development action planning and what does that look like. There are so many kind of tips and tricks, and we just hope you come away from this panel with any little takeaway that can enhance your organization's board and governance practices, because ultimately that leads to better mission impact. And that's, I think, what we all want to achieve with today's conference. So thanks, Michael.
You're welcome. Ellie, if you could take next.
Sure, thank you. Hi, everyone. Very excited to be here today. I'm Ellie Reiter, the Director of Governance and Leadership at Youth Inc. Youth Inc. is a venture philanthropy organization that aims to transform the lives of New York City youth by empowering the organizations that serve them. So we really focus on capacity building for youth development nonprofits in New York City. And as my role of Director of Governance and Leadership, I look to design, coach, facilitate programs that can help boards really be their best, be that strategic partner to the organization in helping fulfill the mission and pursue the impact of the organization. I am also a board chair of an organization called the Soul Foundation that engages in community-driven development work in rural Uganda. So I sort of, like Christine mentioned, I'm sort of trying to live everything that I recommend and espouse and support. I'm always looking to learn from my peers. So just very excited to be here today. Thanks so much.
Amma, if you would give us a little overview of yourself.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It is a pleasure to be here today. I'm very honored by the invitation. My name is Amma Karikari-Yawson, and I am the founder and president of a diversity consulting and training firm called Milestales. Through my work with Milestales, I work with schools, universities, corporations, as well as nonprofits with respect to revealing diversity blind spots. In many cases, we are engaging in diversity climate surveys in which we're finding out exactly how employees are feeling, how students are feeling, how members of the organizations are feeling, and whether they feel as if their various diversity dimensions are being respected. I provide training programs on topics such as implicit bias, and I also engage in some strategic planning with respect to creating an action plan with respect to diversity. I too am a member of a nonprofit board. Woo, 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 woo. All three of us are members. I'm a member of a international nonprofit. It's not in the United States. It's called the African Gifted Foundation. It's an organization that trains young women from all over the continent of Africa for 1 year in helping them to matriculate into phenomenal STEM programs at MIT and at other top rated science and technology universities. And so very proud of that work and how it will reshape the continent. So thank you so much. And I look forward to a great discussion.
Okay, thank you, ladies, and everybody that's out there. I think you've definitely felt the enthusiasm for all three of our panelists. Mm-hmm. They really live it, eat it, breathe it, no question about it. We're talking about resource development. Just like resource development, board development should be an integral part of your nonprofit's strategic planning process. Okay. We're going to have a discussion. We've created a couple of talking points that will give you some information as to how to effectively embed board development into your strategic planning. Or if you're behind schedule, we're going to kind of help you get up to speed. We'll give you some tangible strategies to diversify your board. And we'll also provide you with some forward-thinking approaches to identifying metrics and tracking progress, okay? I'm gonna leave these talking points questions out. Looking at it from a perspective of each one of you is gonna wanna, grab onto the ones that you think, you have the most to say, and then kind of, ham and egg it and go back and forth and see how it plays out. Let's talk about where board development should fit into a strategic planning process and how you've seen that work, okay? Christine, I think this was something that, we thought you were gonna really grab hold of. So why don't you take this one initially?
Sure, happy to. Thanks, Michael. Yeah, I think, this for me is where it should all be kind of housed, right? Everything that your organization works on should really be tied to your strategic plan. So if I was in a room with you all right now, I would say, how many of you have an active strategic plan? And then I would say, it's active. Is it really active? Because so many of us have worked through planning processes and then not really been successful in tracking progress. So I'm so excited that we can have this conversation today to kind of really think back through how effective has your strategic planning process been? If you have not embarked on one yet, how can you start, right? So really just framing this out a bit, and then kind of finally, how important is it to have board development as a key aspect of your organization's strategic planning process? And the answer is extremely important. It's a vital part of your planning process. And if it's been left out or not properly addressed in the past, now's your chance to kind of let's kind of regroup with a working group or a subcommittee to make sure this is part of your strategic plan. Mm-hmm. So just to kind of frame it a bit more, when we think about approaching a strategic planning process, when we're working with a variety of different nonprofits, we think about, who should be part of that? Who do you need in the room, right? And it's really more thinking more broadly than just maybe your executive leadership team. It's, is there a subsection of your board members who you can engage in this process? Hopefully, yes. I hear from some organizations, well, we don't want to ask everybody because what if the people we don't really want to participate? Well, that's the risk you take. And maybe that's a bigger conversation to be had about the composition of your board, right? Because this planning process should be inclusive and it should be intentional. And so just like resource development is something that you're going to discuss and hopefully a nice facilitated conversation where you come out with your goals over the next 3 years, ideally, so should board development fit into it in that context. And so in addition to maybe a subsection of your board members and your leadership team, what about your stakeholders, right? How are you thinking about how your organization is perceived as you start a strategic planning process? And how are you really structuring it so that it's right for your organization? Those are some things I would kind of throw out there for you to think about because every organization is different. Some will include many more parties to be involved in the planning process. If you have multiple entities, a lot of different moving pieces, if you're well-resourced versus a startup. But there is a comfortable place to be, and that really starts with the buy-in of your leadership, really making sure that this planning process is a priority and that it is something that the leadership team feels is important, and it isn't something that you have to be pulled away from a key program to participate in. It's something that it's that important that you want to be part of that. You want to be in that room, and you want to be setting the 1, 2, and 3 year goals for your organization. So I would just stress that as you're thinking about it, if you're in the midst of a planning process or one is coming up or you haven't started, to just make sure that as you're thinking through the key initiatives where your organization can grow, that you make sure that board development is a conversation that is had and facilitated well, so that you can really take stock of where your board is in terms of engagement, in terms of growth, in terms of diversity that we'll talk about later, and all of these things. So just to kind of frame that out, if it's not something that your organization has included before, or maybe you didn't feel like it was a time well spent for whatever reason, hopefully we can impart some ideas and strategies to help you make the most of that time in your planning process and, you know, really figure out what's best for your organization. So I'll stop there and see if our Ellie has anything to add before Michael jumps in.
Yeah, I would say that I completely agree. I would just add this, because right now I'm consulting a nonprofit organization that had an incident blow up during their strategic planning process. So I would just also add that there should be a process to the process. So a code of conduct for meetings, an agenda being set out, potentially a meditation even before. I know it sounds kind of woo-hoo, but I really do think that these things help. The strategic planning process can sometimes be contentious. I'm literally dealing with a nonprofit organization that's dealing with that contention, and I have a conflict resolution specialist on my team who's engaging in 2-hour meetings with each individual. So that said, since this is fresh in my mind, I would just advise or suggest or recommend that organizations really create some guidelines for meetings, some protocols to make sure that the meetings are as effective as possible, and to also make sure that various voices can be heard in a way that is respectful and does not lead to situations of anger. I mean, the nonprofit that I'm talking about, literally the executive director left, ended his stay with the organization because the meeting was that contentious. So please invest the time in creating a code of conduct and protocols for your meetings. That time invested can save a lot of challenges in the future.
I'll go ahead, Ellie, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was first of all just going to say wow, and thank you for that. And I think, real-time case studies and stories are so helpful for really grounding why it's important. I was just going to say, I think what's so wonderful about connecting strategic planning with board development as well is that it can sort of disrupt the cycle. Sometimes boards become very reactive and get stuck in kind of the annual cycle of, okay, we know we need to do this, conflict of interest, annual meeting. But when you have those goals that are 3 years out or, X number of years out, it allows you to think, well, what board do we want to be in years? What board do we need? When we hit those goals and we are that organization that's living those goals, who do we need to be overseeing us? So it allows you to really be proactive and focused. So just wanted to add that.
And I just want to piggyback on that as well. I think what Amma brought up and what Ellie is emphasizing is so important, because a good strategic planning process, a byproduct of that is team building, right? And if there are issues, they will bubble up, right? And that's why it's great to have those ground rules. It's actually essential to create an environment that people find comfort in. And it can be a bonding time to come together and set these goals. And so it's good when difficult things come up because they're addressed head on and you're planning ahead. As Ellie said, you're being proactive and not reactive. And so this, if you don't have the resources to have, a special team building piece for your folks, the strategic planning process is something that can kind of double in that regard and really add that camaraderie and that connectivity among both among the leadership, but also the board members who are participating. It really does build deeper relationships.
Okay, thank you all for that. And I think what we come away with is that there's really a two-part process to all of the board development. It's short-term goals, long-term goals. And I think there's a lot to, as we all know, we know what's in front of us for today, but then let's also be proactive and start thinking about where do we want to be in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and you have to, you know, adjust for that. Okay. So what factors should a nonprofit take into consideration when the nonprofit embarks on looking to diversify its board? And I have a real good feeling that Amma would like to take lead on this.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a really good question. So as part of the strategic planning process, you are thinking about where your organization is going. Who are the various target demographics with respect to your organization? If your organization is geographically based, let's say it's the Garden City Garden Club or something like that, you're thinking about how are the demographics of your actual area, geographic location changing. All of this must be part of it because you want the board representation to represent the people that are being targeted so that you have an insider's viewpoint on what's going on in those various communities. What are their needs? What are their wants? What are their desires? What are the best ways to reach them and to target them? In some cases, some demographics may be, if you're potentially older, they may be interested or they may be more likely to respond if you are promoting your work via radio. For other demographics, it might be social media. These are all considerations. And I have a cautionary tale to give about this very issue. So I live in, actually, I'm going to give it away if I tell you where I live. So I'm just going to say I live on Long Island. And there's a preserve near my house, which is beautiful in many respects. When I was homeschooling my kids, and one of them who has an Asperger's diagnosis would suffer from a panic attack or anxiety, I would go with him and take my other child to this beautiful preserve where literally it was an immersive nature experience because you're in there and you could think that you were in Vermont or Maine, not in a city on Long Island. And I saw that transformative power of nature. However, the preserve is in deep disrepair. There are curse words, graffiti, wrappers from joints all over the place. The trail that you're supposed to take to walk in the preserve is not really a trail. They're just these little platforms or crates that are being used. I actually tripped and broke my ankle with it. I mean, it is such a gem in many respects, but it is an underutilized gem. So now the nonprofit organization that has the mandate to take care of the preserve, I was shocked. It did not look like the multicultural community and multi-generational community that we're from. I went to meeting people. Why was I the only person with Black hair at the meeting? Oh, I was the only person with Black skin too. Even though my community is probably 40% Black, right? And so I really saw in this case study how the organization was unable to respond to the needs of the community simply because its membership was all older and white. They did not really understand how to garner interest in the preserve. They did not really understand how to advertise the need for the preserve to be refurbished or renovated. And they are just really just ill-equipped at this point. And this is the last part of the story, which is really interesting. The one person in the organization who would try to maintain the trails actually died in 2020. And I don't think that the person has been replaced because the board is older. And so I see someone in the chat who's saying that they've seen these sort of things happen. So I think it's imperative for your board to change with the community. And therefore you have to constantly engage in assessments with respect to where your community is at in order to make sure that the board is representative. If your board is not representative, unfortunately, it's very likely that your organization will, one, lose relevance, and two, certainly not be effective. And that is a terrible thing for everyone.
Anybody else have anything to say?
Well, I'll just chime in and say that, as part of that facilitated conversation, absolutely looking at your target audiences is imperative, as Amma has said, because you have many, right? You have your donors, you have the program participants, the people that you are serving, you have all these different types of stakeholders to think about, and making sure that your board is representative of that community that you serve it should be top of mind as you're thinking about where you want to go and what goals you're setting as it relates to board developments. Just to really reemphasize what Amma said in her story is just a great example of how when you fail to do these things, you really not only put your overall sustainability at risk, your organization as a whole it could be no longer, because this stuff is so important. And there are many competing organizations out there. We don't talk about it like competition a lot in the nonprofit space, but it is that. And if, when you go through your SWOT analysis and really think about the threats at the end of that, your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats, there are always going to be competing interests. And it's a bit different than a for-profit approaches it, but similar in that you should be doing whatever you can to attract and serve and follow through on your mission impact. And without taking that audience into account, you may go under, just like any other business would if you're really not following through and doing these essential practices.
Ellie, anything to add on that?
I mean, I would just say it seems like they need to engage in a strategic planning process ASAP. And they should call you, Christine, and you should come in and consult and do some of those sort of constituency assessments. Because I think sort of just to echo both of your points, if they did have that strategic plan and process, probably one of the things that would have been highlighted is that they need to do a lot of work on the board, as well as many, many other things, and that huge disconnect with the community that actually wants to use this place. So I'll just say that.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's a situation where it's not just, we're losing donors or something like that. You actually have a physical presence that is being underutilized, and it's a shame that the community wasn't able to utilize it. And more importantly, if you're telling me that it's falling into disrepair, now I'll talk about my risk management background. Now the problem is the nonprofit could wind up in a negative situation where we have a lawsuit or something like that because something wasn't maintained properly. Mm-hmm. So there's even more that can go wrong when the organization it sounds like it sort of went off the rails, but the key is to, identify that and, bring it back to the board and let them know that, here's what we really need to do, so, okay. So let's take the assumption that, any one of these nonprofits has a feeling as to where they know where they want to go. How do they hold themselves accountable and be clear that they're accomplishing their goals and that their goals are maintained and developed for the long run? So tell me who's going to take lead on this one.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Thanks so much, Michael. Once you have a sense of your strategic direction, and you understand kind of what board you're going to need to have, to accomplish that strategic directive, you want to start developing some goals for your board development. So it's just a really great opportunity to engage in some of those goal setting practices. And really tying your board development goals to the strategic priorities so that your board development goals are strategic imperatives and not just sort of like, well, I think we should have more board members. Well, we need to have more board members. We need to diversify our board because we need to be connected to the community, because we want to expand and we need to be trusted advisors, sort of a through line of thought. It all goes back to the impact there. And again, with board development, I would really recommend, thinking about, what are some clear goals, annual goals that can motivate your board around cultivating, recruiting, and onboarding new members. So again, thinking of board development as not just the recruitment piece, but what is the actual experience of the board and board members once they're on the board. And in terms of setting those goals, if you have a governance and nominating committee or a board development committee, that's probably the most appropriate group to go ahead and identify a couple goals. And then they can also clearly identify what the expectations and roles are of the full board and individual board members in accomplishing those goals. So you really want to set out an explicit through line. And excuse me, sort of critical to having a successful goal setting process as well around board development is continual communication about what the goals are and your current progress towards the goal. I think sometimes we get comfortable as boards and board members in setting the goal, but we don't really want to talk about whether we're accomplishing it or perhaps not accomplishing it. And it's just an incredible muscle to build as a board to be able to talk about whether we're hitting that target or not hitting it. But again, in order to know whether or not we're hitting it, we need to know what the target is, and we need to know what our explicit roles are in trying to hit that target. And this can be consistent communication can allow you to celebrate the wins. So it's a great motivational tool. And then it allows you to, again, build that muscle around having meaningful discussions about when you don't hit your target. So you can have these discussions at every board meeting. You can communicate it between board meetings, either through the committee structure or kind of ad hoc emails. You know, and I think setting explicit goals is really great for diversifying your board as well, sort of to a lot of Amma's points about how critical it is these days. Not only are you diversifying your board because it's a strategic imperative, but you also set clear goals to disrupt the idea that, oh, well, I've already tapped my whole network, or there's no one really out there that fits all of, you know, what we're looking for. You know, set a clear goal and then talk about, are we hitting it? Or are we not hitting it? Have we actually put the effort in we need to hit those goals? So really just want to say, you know, framing your board development goals within the strategic plan allows board members to really understand the impact that they have, both positive and negative sometimes, of hitting or missing those goals.
Sounds good. Anybody have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would just say that I completely agree. And I feel as if this is a part of your process and making sure that part of your process includes the reevaluation of those goals, right? And so as Ellie was saying, you've made your goals, you have some of your targets with respect to your numbers and your demographics, but as the community changes again, and as different situations arise, you decide to start new lines of service or what have you, you're constantly reevaluating those goals to make sure that they're in line with your mission.
I just want to say I like how Ellie called it a muscle, because it is that. It's that muscle memory for anyone who's an athlete, that once you create your first report card and you begin revisiting it, it's not the end of the world if a goal isn't achieved in year one that you set for year one. It might get moved to year two. It may no longer be applicable. Someone asked about, you know, COVID, post-COVID strategic planning. Circumstances could completely change. And that's why these are living, breathing documents that can be adapted, and that's okay. But once you get that muscle memory going, you have your metrics, it's that much more likely that you're going to be advancing and achieving and tracking your progress.
Right. I think the sum of that is that there's really nothing that's set in stone, that all of these organizations and their planning and their processes have to look at it from a perspective of today, tomorrow, and we may be changing the next day, and we may have to make an adjustment as to, you know, where we're going. You know, there's no organization that has the ability to have, you know, clear plan thinking for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and nothing's going to change. That's not from a for-profit to a nonprofit. So how should a nonprofit communicate and share their strategic planning goals beyond the strategic planning group, and how can this information be most effectively received within the community, et cetera?
So I'll jump in on this one. Thanks, Michael. I think, you know, I really just want to emphasize that just as it's essential to have a mechanism for tracking progress, it's essential to convey your high-level plan goals to your staff community at large. Without that, your overall team won't feel connected to your organization and where it's going. When you have that connectivity across your organization, across your enterprise, then your staff feels more tied to the organization, tied to the social mission. And so some ways that you can accomplish this are, in this age of, I think we have 7 seconds of attention span these days, something ridiculous. right? So most plans end up being, 20 plus pages because that's what happens. Every time I try to make it shorter, it ends up being a hearty document, which is fine. But how many board members are going to dig in and read 20 plus pages, right? So many of you do this already, right? So, this might not be a new concept, but make sure you have a one pager. Make sure you have a visually appealing representation of your plan that everyone can have access to. And not only should you have a condensed version, something a little bit more attractive than just a summary, if possible, because you want this to stick with folks. What are the top 5 goals over the next 1, 2, and 3 years, vision-wise, right? Where are you headed, right? Why are we focusing on this program versus these others? Here's why. There's potential here. Thought has gone into this. And you want to not only get buy-in ahead of time if possible, which is another conversation, around surveying and different ways of asking for staff feedback, but also conveying that document in a concise, visually appealing way can really go a long way. And the one last thing I'll add here is that if you have a larger team, the leadership should absolutely hold some sort of town hall type of gathering, or all staff, something that really allows them to convey the value of them as staff to the organization and why their value is essential to achieving the strategic plan goals, because this all ties together. And so without that piece, you will lose morale, you will lose your folks being entrenched, dedicated to the organization. It's a real misstep that takes time to cover, but is really important in keeping your team together. And in this day and age of the Great Resignation, I think they're still calling it, right? It is really hard to replace good people, and good people have a lot of options. And so by doing things like this, you're so much more likely to keep your good people, because they will feel like, wow, my work is tied to that 3-year goal. I see why my role is essential, why I am important at this organization. And that is something that a lot of leaders are really thinking about more now.
Okay, anybody else want to add anything to that?
I just want to emphasize the point that Christine already made in terms of how important it is to communicate those goals and the short version of the strategic plan to community members for the purpose of building morale. So the nonprofit that I mentioned that I'm currently consulting had a very contentious strategic planning meeting. The last time that I met with them, we did an exercise in which every person had to discuss very briefly why he, she, or they entered the organization, what inspired them and what motivated them. And it shifted the entire energy in the room, so to speak, the Zoom room, right? This work is hard. Let's be honest, okay? Very often when you are working at a nonprofit, very often the work is challenging. Very often people feel underpaid. Very often people wonder whether their work really matters, especially when they're having interpersonal conflicts with other people within the organization. You cannot underestimate what a morale booster it is and how far it goes in terms of retention when you're constantly reminding people of the greater mission and what their sometimes seeming mundane tasks mean for the greater mission of the organization and impact in the world. So please do it regularly. It can't be stressed enough.
Yeah, and I would just add to, making sure board members are included, that a lot of achieving strategic goals, there's a role for staff and there's often a role for the board as well. A lot will be staff, but really that partnership between staff and board in accomplishing those goals, and we can even think of it in board development as well. Maybe staff is helping to update the materials, consulting on the process, supporting and helping you apply to, different matching services and things such as that. So that, so board members can also see how their work day to day advances, the priorities, as well as staff, and how critical that partnership is.
Okay, so I think to sum that, planning, communication, and the willingness to make adjustments as things go forward. Nobody, as I said before, nobody really has the clear thought as to where something's going to go, and know that there's always going to be adjustments made. Okay, so let's discuss some strategies for locating diverse candidates. to bring to these organizations, boards, et cetera.
Wonderful. I can help you with that. So the way that you're identifying these diverse candidates in many ways mimics the same way that you are finding diverse candidates when you're looking for regular job opportunities. You are perusing LinkedIn. You are speaking to the people who are currently members and asking them to dig into their networks. The wonderful advantage is this: joining boards has become a very hot topic. I'm a member of 3 alumni organizations, right? I went to Harvard undergrad. I'm in touch. Wharton, for my MBA, I'm in touch. University of Pennsylvania Law School. Literally every single alumni organization that I am a part of is speaking about this very issue. How can we get more racial minorities on boards? How can we get more women on boards? Why exactly is it important to be on a board? For networking purposes, for community impact, to learn certain skills that your job may not be providing you, but the next job that you want requires those skills. So I would like to say that what you want you. If you are engaging in this process, you are engaging in the same sort of activities that you would for a job role. You're on LinkedIn, you're reading publications, okay? You read a publication about an amazing human being and you think that there is an alignment or intersection between that person's skill set and that person's interest with your organization. You're sending an email to that person and saying, hello, I just read about you in Essence Magazine, or I just read about you on Business Insider. I feel as if this may be an opportunity that you want to explore. And then you are also targeting alumni organizations. My alma mater, Wharton, for example, has a specific team member that is devoted to helping place Wharton graduates on boards. So that said, there's tremendous opportunity to find qualified, interested, and engaged board members who are just waiting for you to reach out to them.
Okay. Anybody have anything else to add on that?
I just think a lot of people are going to want that Wharton contact.
I know. Call me right now, actually.
I know I want it, actually.
Absolutely, absolutely. I may put a name in the chat. I'll go check my email right now.
All right, so let's see. Let's go next. So let's discuss being creative about goal setting and identifying metrics. For example, how many people have we reached out to? What steps to begin to create a pool of candidates? Let's kind of explore this, this area of board development.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll jump in here. And I think, Amma, it's a great sort of segue, talking about some of the resources that you notified. So when and this sort of goes back to this idea of, right, we know what strategic priorities we have. We know what kind of board we want to be in order to accomplish those strategic priorities. So now we're going to set some goals around how we're going to accomplish becoming that board. And I would sort of recommend thinking about your goals as kind of bigger picture outcome goals. So we want, we need X% of our board to have legal expertise, and I appreciate the demographic. We want more of our board to reflect the communities that we serve. Let's be really, explicit around that. So that kind of bigger picture outcome. And again, we want this all because it's driving the strategic priorities. I'm just going to keep saying that because I think as board members, we always want that link. We're not just diversifying because everybody's diversifying. It's a strategic imperative. We have said we need to connect to our community. We need to be a trusted organization. These are ways that we can do this. So I would recommend, again, kind of those big picture goals, but also some process goals. To go back to building the muscle of your board, the thing about board development is it never ends. There isn't really a destination. You're always building your board. And so it's a practice that you just need to continue to build year over year. And so when I talk about kind of process goals versus the bigger picture outcome goals, I'm thinking about, and again, it goes back to Amma's point, set some goals around your sources for board members. So, let's set a goal to try to get at least one board member from LinkedIn. Let's get at least 2 board members from matching services. And let's try to get, 2 board members from our board member network. And maybe we even step it back and we don't even say, the end result is a board member. Of course, that's what we want, but let's just start with introductions. Shoot, let's see if we can talk to a few people from LinkedIn. Let's see if we can talk to a few matching services. Let's see if we can get our board members to, across the board, 5 new introductions. So again, when you think about goal setting for board development, I would think about both these sort of intermediary steps. That'll help to generate some wins, wins that you can then communicate to your board to motivate them, keep them excited, make them think, oh, maybe I do have some folks in my network, or I never thought to tap into this, network over here, as well as keeping your eye on the big picture. We'd like to invite at least 3 more board members, or at least this set of skill sets. I would also encourage you to think about your board and board development creatively in terms of, what are leadership qualities? We need more visionaries on our board. How many of our board think of themselves as strategists or tacticians? And the more you're kind of thinking creatively about the skill sets and the qualities that you need on your board, you can bring that into your recruitment conversations to get folks excited about being on the board. So again, if you're diversifying your board, folks aren't thinking, oh, well, they're trying to diversify their board, so they're only speaking to me because I'm a person of color. But it's, no, oh, well, actually, I am a vision. I do have this. I am a visionary, and I do have my, I'm a lawyer, and I have X, Y, Z. So that is certainly part of the added value, but it's not the only added value. And then the other thing I would just say also about board development is it's not just about the recruitment. I've been sort of focusing on that. But you might also want to think about what are some of your objectives of the experience of being on the board. And so, Amma, when you were mentioning that you do sort of environmental assessments of kind of, do folks feel included? Do they feel like they belong? I was interested if you ever do that for boards, because I think these are other objectives that boards should be considering in board development.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's that these assessments are sent to the board, and we're going to get into this topic a little bit later, of making sure that there is cohesion among the board. So there are studies that show that when people like each other, of course, and when they feel more connected, they clearly do better work, right? So one study showed that if an orchestra, you take members of orchestras who are literally of the same caliber with respect to their work, and the one where they actually are connected sound 500% better because they actually follow the director's instructions. Whereas if there are contentious relationships, they default to their own arrangement instead of following the director's arrangement. And you can imagine how bad that sounds, right? So, so I completely agree with you that making sure that there's that cohesion, that there's that respect, that feeling of community and belonging is going to be so critical to making sure that a board is successful.
I would just say that Ellie talked about strategic recruitment, and that if your organization has not made the time to do a board matrix and really ask members to self-identify and also identify those gaps together collectively, it's a great engagement session, a great team building session, and it's easy for anyone to participate and jump in wherever they might be in terms of their path with the organization. But that gets you to that kind of connection to your strategic goals by having that sort of session. And if you check off all the boxes, so to speak, and you're in alignment, fantastic. However, usually, to Ellie's point of this being the ongoing muscle, there are areas to improve. Those are identified as a group, and then you can tackle them as a group.
Okay. All right. Great work, ladies. I want to try and quicken up a little bit because I know we're getting close, and I want to make sure that we can get to some questions if there are any. So what are the impediments that nonprofits face in recruiting diverse candidates?
Thank you so much. I think this is a really, really great and important question. So, you all know the nonprofits that you're a part of and the board requirements. I know that one huge impediment has been minimum donation. requirements. So I have been approached by an organization to be on the board, and it required a 20,000 commitment. I know others who have been approached and they simply were unable to invest that amount. And so that's one huge impediment that I think many nonprofits are interested in making sure that they really have a diverse board that's representative of the communities that they serve and their stakeholders and whatnot, need to reconsider. How are there ways that it might be able to be adjusted? How are there ways in which a person might, engage in some sort of sweat equity, so to speak? Can they be given a certain amount of time to fundraise? I am the beneficiary of a nonprofit organization called the Oliver Scholars Program that helped me to get a scholarship to boarding school. I went to a Quaker boarding school called George School. The founder of the organization left to start another nonprofit and then came back. And then he was asked to provide a $10,000 or $15,000 donation requirement, which he was unable to provide. And can you imagine, he wasn't able to rejoin the board of an organization that he himself had started from the ground up and had brought to an extremely, amazing level. So I just tell you that story to say, this is real, it happens. And boards are missing out on huge opportunities to gain a wealth of knowledge and impact because of these donation requirements. So let's think about how we can be innovative with respect to the requirements, whether it's fundraising, whether it's sort of a sweat equity, whether they figure out how to provide resources in other ways. We really need to be more open. I think that some of the other impediments besides the donation requirement are also, lack of familiarity and trust with the organization. And Ellie was kind of discussing this as well, the challenge of community and belonging. Clearly, when you are trying to engage in any sort of diversity effort, whether it's within your organization, among employees or schools, you need to make sure that the organization is actually accommodating and welcoming, right? So right now, if I give the example of that board that runs the preserve that's near my house, I mean, I'm not saying that I don't like 70-year-old people, and 80-year-old people. I'm an open-minded person, but I think that integrating myself, despite the fact that I'm committed, I'm really interested in the preserve. If I'm the only person there, with people with a huge generational difference, it might be challenging. It might pose some issues for me with respect to community and belonging. And it might be less appealing because I'm literally going to be the only person of a certain age, of a certain race, of a certain time in life. It's a mother of 2 kids, right? And so we have to kind of think creatively with respect to making sure that when we're onboarding people, there is an atmosphere for them to succeed and for them to connect.
Okay, some great thoughts there. So what do organizations have in common that they're able to set and achieve their strategic goals?
I'll jump in first, and I'm sure Ellie and Amma might want to add to this. I'll just reemphasize the commitment and the buy-in from leadership is essential. Making sure that a strategic planning process is a priority and that's conveyed. And also the structure in which you embark on it is something that's comfortable for your team, right? Being sensitive to the million hats that all of us are wearing that work at nonprofits. I was in the nonprofit sector for 15 years before going to the other side, if you will, and now serving as a board member. So it's very top of mind for me that there were points in my career where, it was really, really difficult to dedicate that energy and that mental strength to a strategic planning process if we had other really, really intense pressures on us as an organization. So just think from the perspective of your leadership team members and then allow them the opportunity to participate and make it a safe space for them. That feeling of belonging applies to all the aspects of how we are involved in our organizations, whether it's as a key staffer, as a board member, et cetera. So kind of setting up that comfortable environment and those important ground rules that we all agree on together really sets the stage for a process that can be effective, that can be inclusive, and that will be successful.
Okay. Can I just jump in for a quick sec? Yeah, and this is what I just sort of love too about the premise of strategic planning, tying it with board development, going back to what Amma was saying about the give-get potentially being a barrier to the folks that you want on your board joining the board. Because if your board development is really driven by your strategic priorities, sure, fundraising is certainly, always will be one of the priorities, but there will be other priorities as well. And they'll all be held at the same sort of value level as peer strategic priorities. And so thinking of your board development with these added value that are peer added values, yes, the networks, yes, the fundraising, I think, and really with fundraising, I tend to think it's the attitude. If you have someone who comes in and is doing their darndest, they're going to get some results, even if they don't come in saying, hey, I have the biggest network. But that's one of the reasons that I also love really tying board development to your strategic priorities, because it allows you and your full board to see all of these different, talents and skills that folks bring as, peers alongside the fundraising capacity.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I think that a common thread here is that you have to be open-minded and innovative. And by creating a strategic plan, which is more holistic, you're able to tap into those opportunities to engage in potential alliances that may not have seemed off the bat as being beneficial, but once you realize that there are greater goals in mind, they can be beneficial.
Mm-hmm. So Michael, I don't know. Can you see, I don't know if we can see the question here in the chat. Thank you so much.
Hold on, yes, there is, there was one that was up a little while ago. And the question is, when does a founder know that it's time to step down, even if the board doesn't see it? Okay, so why don't go for whoever wants it first? Go ahead.
I can just say that when you have your strategic priorities in place, right? If you look at your 1, 2, and 3-year goals, sometimes it comes to the point where that person, that founder, may no longer be an asset to achieving those priorities. And those things kind of come to light when you take the time to embark on a planning process that's really thoughtful. And so it's always a challenging time. This all comes down to that we're people. We all have personalities. We're all human. And we connect in different ways, and it can be uncomfortable, but having those priorities set helps to come to a very kind of measured decision as a group when that time may have come for a given founder. So I'll just, I'll see if my fellow panelists want to weigh in. I'm sure we've all seen those situations unfold.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point, that it's sort of the, adage, what got you here isn't necessarily what's going to get you there. And so it does take kind of the emotion out of it a little bit to just talk about, what you've done and what, if you're the founder who's ready to move on, but the board's not ready, to be able to say, look at all these amazing things we want to do. These are the leadership qualities, that are needed, that might diverge from where they are. And I would also just recommend normalizing the succession conversation, even if succession, is going to be in 20, if you're a founder and you say, I still want to do this for 20 years, and I think I'm the person to do it for the next 20 years. But if we can get succession tools in place, like emergency backup plans or a succession policy, and just have that conversation, we can think about the ED salary through the lens of succession. Is it up to market rate? What happens if you as a board, you need to go and find a new ED? It could be tough if the founder's been, underpaying themselves. So obviously I have a lot of thoughts on this topic, but I would just say, try to start normalizing the conversation so that it doesn't feel like we went from 0 to I'm leaving, in 6 months.
Wow. I think that's a really great point. I would also add that founders need to be vulnerable. Right? They need to be vulnerable in saying, this is where my life is at right now at this moment. This is where my heart is at. These are my feelings. These are my personal goals versus my professional goals. And so when you're having vulnerable conversations consistently about where this work fits into the greater picture of your life, hopefully it's not a shock when it's time to move on. And as Ellie has said, you've already been thinking about this. You've already been grooming. This is going to be key. With respect to succession planning, you've already been grooming other members of your organization, other members of your board, or whomever, to be able to take on the helm when you realize that it's time to move on.
Okay. I think we've hit all the questions that we had. And
I see one more.
Oh,
Yeah,
you do?
There's actually a couple, I think.
Oh, go ahead.
What's so perfect about this discussion? So Amy, hi Amy, asked about succession planning templates. Prior to that, someone asked about strategic plan templates. And in case you didn't see it in the chat, I'm always happy to share those. There's a couple that I look to if you're trying to do this internally. They're great templates you can start from to really check to see if your past plan is covering what it should, and really some good best practices. So we'll be sure to share those. And then I don't know if Ellie or Amma want to weigh in about a succession plan template. It really goes back to, Ellie, your point about normalizing that process. Are you aware of a template that you look to, or is it more of a conversation to build the succession plan?
So we do have some templates that we recommend that I'll just need to confirm that we can share out. But again, it tends to be a succession policy, which the board puts together and asks what I tend to think to be kind of non-controversial questions. You know, if it were a planned transition, you know, would we do a national search or a local search? We would put together a committee. It would be called this. This is who would be on it. We would consider an acting or an interim in the event of an emergency. You know, does our organization have a precedent of promoting internal candidates? So it just gives the board sort of some guideposts for when the moment comes, but they get to talk about it, hopefully in not sort of the panic mode of, oh my goodness, our, you know, ED, it has decided to leave. And then we pair that with emergency backup plans, which again is sort of in the event of an unplanned transition or unplanned absence. It's basically, what are my key functions, you know, as the ED, what are my key functions? Who would be the backup? You know, what are my key relationships? Is there one person who would step up as the decision maker? So again, your organization feels really protected and prepared. And those are tools that we would recommend organizations have in place, you know, at any given time, not just thinking about the actual transition, but as part of creating the environment in which the transition will occur.
Sounds like a great answer. I wanted to point out one question in the Q&A, and I'll start, and I know other people will weigh in. What aspects should be on this matrix to evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of a board? And so very often you have a list of the various skill sets that are needed in order for your board to be a well-functioning board. Those skill sets may be someone who really understands finance and compliance with nonprofit tax issues. Another may be someone who is, as Ellie had mentioned, a visionary. And another may be someone who really understands, you know, the legal aspects. You have a list. And if you don't have one, you should be creating a list of all of the various skill sets that are really, really critical, especially with respect to your line of work, as well as the various issues that I discussed earlier in terms of the demographics that you're serving, wanting to make sure that there's adequate representation. Your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats are generally going to be evaluated looking at that sort of criteria, as well as when we think about threats, thinking about the external landscape, right? So the COVID-19 pandemic is something that many of us didn't see happening, but now we know it happened. So we recognize that there's a threat that at any time there might be a shutdown, there might be another health issue. We recognize that climate change is a threat that might occur. Whatever it may be, you are constantly looking at your board and you're comparing them to that list of the various skills that you need and the various, let's call them geopolitical issues that really impact your industry. I'm sure my co-panelists have a lot more to add.
I mean, I would just say you could also start too by surveying your current board. And I think Christine might have sort of mentioned this around how they see themselves. What talents do they bring? And I think Amma, maybe you noted this earlier too about the gaps, right? So you and I would ask them exciting questions, you know, what are talents that we're not using on the board? You know, what are, you know, the talents you do in your day job? What are skills that you have outside? You know, what are skills you want to develop? So you really get this sort of holistic picture of the team. And then you can also, right, you can pair that with what your strategic priorities are and what you think the skill sets are that you need. And then you can start to build out, again, kind of what we're looking for. There are also various templates, I would say, kind of on the internet as well. And that probably Nonprofit Resource Hub has also around what these matrices can look like. But I would encourage you to take sort of what the template looks like and then be creative around it.
Exactly. And one specific organization that I like to highlight is the Adelphi Center for Nonprofit Leadership on Long Island. And they have a fantastic board matrix template where you can start from that and then build out. You know, I work with a client, they're really working a lot on digital accessibility, and they realize, wow, we have some tech folks on our board, but not exactly the skill sets we need to leverage, or they're expanding in a variety of ways where renovations are needed. Do we have the right people that understand architecture in this way to really guide us if we need that kind of board support? So those are the conversations that come up when you dig into the matrix.
Okay.
I think we're right on time, Michael. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah. Well, we have one last question that I saw. Ellie, this is directed to you. Is there a nonprofit similar to You Think located on Long Island?
So thanks. Yeah, I don't know if there's one exactly like You Think, but I think Christine mentioned Adelphi University. Is that right? Is that located in Long Island? I think it is, right? Okay. They have a huge nonprofit resource hub, and they're so they might be a place to start. And I can always get back to you if I learn of anything.
Yep, we can get back to everybody on that. So what I'd like to just quickly sum up, like to thank everybody that listened, participated in terms of questions and what have you. I hope that you garnered the understanding that our panelists are extremely passionate about what they do, extremely knowledgeable, a diverse group in terms of their experience and the wealth of knowledge that they have with regard to helping nonprofits move forward, et cetera. Look forward to working with you and helping everybody kind of guide, build, develop their boards, et cetera. So thank you all for participating, and especially I'd like to thank my panelists. They made my job very easy.
Likewise,
Thank
Michael.
you so much.
Yep. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks everybody. So my job is to click end. Before I do that, I'll just say, please join us for the last panel. One of the last, I should say, panel and then networking. Allison LaFerlita, the executive director of the Nonprofit Resource Hub, is about to lead a panel with 4 esteemed nonprofit leaders that will be participating. It's always great to hear directly from the folks doing the work day in and day out. I always feel so encouraged and inspired after those panels. And so stick around, and thank you again for your time. Thank you, Amma. Thank you, Ellie. Thank you, Michael. This has been so much fun, and for adapting on the fly to virtual. You know, we all just go with it and we get it done. And I hope you all enjoyed this. We really appreciate you listening and learning along with us. Okay,
Thank
care, everybody.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you.